So clearly I am the comic relief of the evening because I am not a researcher, I am not an engineer. I never thought I would feel like a minority in a group of women engineers, like ever. So I want to talk about things from a bit of a different perspective for International Women's Day. Everybody remember this? Oh yeah, it was a good campaign, right? The Ontario government did a really good job on this. So, so many years ago, this was me-ish. I had a boss who was in love with me. And it's not cute, and it's not Hollywood, and it doesn't get flipped, you know, and I wasn't Demi as much as I wanted to be Demi in the 80s. I totally did. But yeah, it wasn't cute, and it wasn't sweet, and it wasn't endearing, and it wasn't like they fell in love at the end of the day, and, you know, it was all that good story. It was exhausting, and it was tragic, and it was frustrating, and it was debilitating, and it was an awful experience to go through. And I know a lot of women go through these kinds of experiences, but we don't talk about it openly. So this is part of my bravery to be vulnerable and sharing these kinds of stories, because I think it's important for us to talk about these things. So it had reached a crescendo for me, and I wasn't able to sustain and manage things any longer. So I went to go see this woman. And her name is Beth Symes, and she got the Order of Canada back in 2010 because she is a fierce advocate for feminist issues. And it was my good fortune to be introduced to her, and I went to go see her. So I sat down with her, and she walks in the room, and this woman is like full on looking like Murphy Brown. And anybody who was born after 1998, Google Murphy Brown right now, okay? She walks in and she's got this crisp white shirt on, and and she's in this beautiful old house down in mid-Toronto, and I sit down and I tell her my story, and I've got the stack of BBMs, and I'm telling her everything that's going on, and I'm speaking about a mile a minute, and she looks at me at one point and she said, "Karen, I'm going to talk to you like we're a couple of girlfriends having a bottle of wine." And I was like, I love those conversations. And she turns around and she asked me this question. Oh. So this was me. And it wasn't anybody who knows me know that it wasn't the question that scared me or set me off, because I'm quite comfortable with the vernacular. It was the fact that I wasn't expecting it from her. And in that moment, she educated me. And I felt like it was a cold cock punch right to the head. It was exactly what I needed. What she said to me was, "Karen, clearly you are not being valued by your organization. So what you need to do is every single day, do one thing to get you closer to where you want to be." And it was the first time I was a young woman. I didn't have a professional designation. I was a single mom. I didn't have the ability, Mike Harris, I became a Canadian in '96 because Mike Harris decided to change my school plan. So I was, landed immigrant, had been here, American, Canadian, and British now, triple threat. But at that point, I became a Canadian because I wanted to vote against Mike Harris, because he took away my options. And that's what happens to a lot of women. Our options and our opportunities are taken away. And this was happening to me in this work environment. My opportunities were being taken away from me. So when she educated me to this option, when she told me what to do to take care of myself, for the first time in my life, I became my career. It wasn't to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, to be a professional in that regard. I became my career. And that changed my life. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that we bring value no matter what our role is. And we bring value to a conversation. We've talked a lot tonight about diversity and that inclusion and different perspectives, and how I love the pieces of work from Catalyst, because it shows quite clearly that when we actually are more inclusive, our organizations do better no matter what the organization. And you know what that is? That's my alarm. 1 second. So just so my boys know, you should be doing your 5-minute journal right now, because they're watching. Don't get away without doing homework and when I'm around. All right, so So now, about 5 years ago, this was me. I look happy, don't I? Super happy. So 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with a condition called ulcerative colitis. Anybody know what ulcerative colitis is? I'm sure there's going to be a few people in here that are a little not so quiet now. This is the stuff we don't talk about again. It's when your body basically shuts down. It is when the lower part of your intestinal system is diseased and has real problems in just doing those basic human functions at times. Not all the time, but when it goes into crisis, you're in crisis. Nothing is more humbling than when that most banal part of the human condition is not working. So this was the effect and the impact of me being really unhappy. I was stressed. I was doing work that I wasn't impassioned about. I wasn't being valued, and clearly it showed. So after I went into crisis, I was in hospital for about 5 days, and then I just started to peter back and get out into the community again and go to lunches, and that was a big deal. Like getting up and putting on makeup and going out for lunch was like a big deal in recovery. And so one of those first lunches I went to was with a friend of mine named Janet Sinclair, who is this urban shaman. Is that not like the best title ever? Like if you want to give yourself a title, like urban shaman is the best title. So she had done an Ignite talk for us in Stratford, which was pretty amazing, and Jody was there. It was awesome. And so we sat down and we were telling, each other kind of our stories, like what was going on in our lives. And I told her, and she goes, "Oh, ulcerative colitis, eh?" She's also a Reiki master. And she turns around and she says to me, yeah, we can lie to ourselves, but our bodies don't lie to ourselves." So this was my reaction. And of course, what was I holding on to? I was holding on to a lot of things. I was holding on to a mortgage, and I was holding on to security, and I was holding on to paying my bills and being in a scenario that allowed me to be at home. And, it wasn't great, but it was something that allowed me to actually kind of find some balance. But apparently I wasn't quite as balanced as I had hoped. So the reality, of course, is that I was fearful of that change, and my body was showing me that it wasn't working for me any longer. So if nobody's heard of this company, I hope you hear of them soon. So this is Empatico, and they are a startup out of Stratford, and I'm a huge, huge fan of this organization. So this is Don Wright, and Dr. Don Wright is the scientist behind this company. And he... It's a psychometric Jungian-based science that they use to actually help create hot teams. So it looks at team dynamics and what happens when you put differing personalities together, and helps you actually work with them on a dashboard. Seriously, check out Empatico. It's my little plug. They're awesome. But of course, being a friend, I was around in the early days, and I was doing kind of the beta testing and redlining all their science, because I kind of fall in between a few different kind of personality traits. But ENFP is kind of my go-to. If I'm an ENTP sometimes, but ENFP is pretty solid. So Don's giving me, well, this is when we relate it to Myers-Briggs, and he's giving me this breakdown of kind of what does that mean for me in my everyday experience. And he says, as an ENFP, he goes, "You've already won the universe. You've already beaten all the aliens, and you slayed all the dragons." And then he had a question for me. Can you just enjoy it? Well, yes, I can. In my best moments, of course I can. But it's so hard. I spend so much time, talking about what do I see and what do I know, and I validate to the nth degree. Does that sound familiar to anybody? And I know this because, and I experience that because, and I can give you this information because, well, the reality is I'm informed by a million different data points, and when I know, I know. I know because I'm informed by those data points. And he was telling me how when I validate myself, I just drop my energy. So something that I'd been experiencing through those different years and those pictures that you saw earlier. So what I wanted to wrap this around is that fear, the imposter syndrome, fear of success, fear of not being good enough, fear of not being smart enough, fear of not being educated enough. All these fears, they are the only thing that are really killing us. These are the things that stop us from trying. They're the things that stop us from applying for engineering roles. They certainly have stopped me from applying at Google. Just saying, we can talk, like really. maybe? So, but no matter what it is that we're approaching, no matter what it is that we're doing, we have opportunity ahead of us. And so tonight we've talked a lot about mentorship. And part of that is, mentorship really comes when it's really, and it has such that impact that changes your lives. That comes from a place of trust, right? When you trust the person it's coming from. But sometimes mentorship comes not from a built relationship. So we've talked about Sun Life has a mentoring program. We've talked about the engineering program has a mentoring program, right? Everyone at one point, Catalyst has talked about how important mentorship and P2P programs are. And Dinah just talked about it as well with the programs at Communitech. And these are incredibly important programs, and I am a huge advocate for them. And they are very different from champions and ambassadors and sponsors in more corporate environments. And those are also incredibly important. But what I wanted to share from these examples tonight is sometimes mentoring can happen in a moment. Sometimes it can be a $500 an hour meeting with a lawyer. And sometimes it can be with somebody who has some insights about you. And sometimes it's going to come from somebody who's loving and caring and supporting of you. But sometimes really mentoring is just going to happen. So you've got to be open to being mentored, but also open yourself up to mentoring. I call this the gift of honest feedback, which quite honestly makes me unpopular at times. I've accepted that. I try to do it with kindness. I try to do it with love. But I also, the way when Tony talked about how this is inevitable, right? And Mary, you said that it was, it's inevitable. It's not inevitable if we don't do anything about it. This is why I say these things. This is why I call these elephants out and I eat those elephants on the table. This is why we need to have these conversations, because unless we talk about sexual harassment, unless we talk about how you get blocked in progression at organizations, unless we talk about the biases in interviewing and everything else, unless we talk about these things, we continue to not move forward with them. So I encourage you to embrace those opportunities. I encourage you to remember that you are a fierce warrior and that you need to enable that fierce warrior for others around you. And in the least, let's try to just abandon that perfection. Thank you very much.